A voice from across the room asks if everything is okay, and the phone is already turned face down on the table. The reply comes so quickly it almost overlaps the question itself. "I'm fine, just tired." The person asking nods and turns back to their work, while the forced smile drops from the speaker's face in less than a second. What remains after that smile falls away is a tight chest and a single unanswered question. What does fine actually cost us when it is not true? Most of us learn early that certain feelings belong in private, and that calm surfaces keep social life smooth. A child who cries at a birthday party might be told to cheer up, and the lesson lands quietly. Strong reactions disturb people. By adulthood, the habit of saying, "I'm fine," has become so automatic it can fire faster than the feeling it is meant to disguise. The obvious explanation is that this is simply politeness, a necessary filter between our inner weather and the demands of the outside world. Sometimes that filter is genuinely useful, keeping us from bursting into tears during a meeting or snapping at someone who does not deserve it. But when a filter becomes a permanent wall, the effort of holding it up begins to draw from the same energy we need for everything else. The first turn is this: the word fine is not just a social shortcut. It can be the tip of a much more exhausting hidden operation. Psychologists call this operation emotional suppression, the deliberate effort to hold down an emotion once it has already started rising. Think of it like pressing your full weight onto a lid while steam gathers underneath. Your muscles are working even if nothing on the surface moves. A related but different process, cognitive reappraisal, works earlier by changing how you interpret a situation before the full emotional wave hits. Suppression, by contrast, swings into action after the wave is already rolling, which is why it feels like a constant act of internal wrestling. Our phone-checking colleague is not simply being quiet. They are actively redirecting attention, controlling their face, and choosing words that do not match their body. On the surface, this looks like composure, but inside it is a multitasking marathon that the brain runs poorly while pretending it is not running at all. Compared with those allowed to show their feelings naturally, the suppressors showed a jolt in activity of the sympathetic nervous system, the body's readiness alarm. Their heart rates did not calm down when their faces did. The calm was only skin deep, and the physiological stress signals continued climbing. In another set of memory experiments, people who suppressed strong feelings during an emotional event later recalled fewer precise details about what actually happened. The mental energy required to keep a calm exterior seemed to steal resources from the very systems that encode and store clear memories. That means a difficult conversation you weathered with a tight smile may leave you remembering only the sting, not the specific words that could help you resolve it later. So far, the pattern looks like a trade-off. You buy temporary social comfort at the price of a more stressed body and a blurrier record of the event. But the cost runs deeper because a suppressed emotion does not exit the stage. It merely waits in the wings, often gaining strength in the dark. Researchers have repeatedly found that trying to push a thought or feeling out of awareness can produce a rebound effect, where it later returns more insistently. Imagine telling yourself not to think about a white bear for 5 minutes. The bear keeps intruding, and after the 5 minutes ends, it floods your mind. The same ironic process applies to emotions. The more fiercely you push sadness down, the more likely it is to resurface when your guard is briefly lowered. This is why a day of being resolutely fine can end with you weeping in the car or snapping at the person who asks what you want for dinner. Our colleague from the opening scene is now sitting through a meeting, nodding steadily, while a knot tightens just beneath their ribs. The act of suppression has turned a single sharp disappointment into a diffuse physical tension that may last far longer than the original emotion would have. The mechanism under pressure involves three linked systems: attention, physiology, and social signaling. Attention gets hijacked first because monitoring whether your face is still arranged properly demands constant mental vigilance. Every time a thought about the upsetting message drifts in, a redirection effort kicks in, consuming the same limited workspace you need for listening and problem solving. This explains why someone who is secretly distressed often misses large portions of instruction or fails to notice important social cues from others. Meanwhile, the body stays in a low-grade alarm state, with stress hormones circulating longer than they would if the emotion had been expressed, named, or shared. Importantly, the social signaling system also begins to malfunction because other people are astonishingly good at detecting when an expression is slightly off. A genuine smile involves tiny muscles around the eyes that are very hard to control voluntarily. A polite smile often lacks that particular crinkling. When others pick up these micro-signals of inauthenticity, even unconsciously, they tend to feel less trust and more guardedness in return. So, while you thought your fine mask was protecting the relationship, it may have been quietly thinning the connection you were trying to preserve. One striking set of findings showed that people instructed to suppress their emotions during a conversation were liked less by their partners than those who expressed naturally. The partners also showed rises in their own blood pressure, suggesting that emotional suppression can be physiologically contagious. This is the second turning point. Fine is not a neutral shield. It is an active signal that can raise stress in the people around you. Yet the most counterintuitive discovery is that suppression does not reliably reduce the internal experience of negative emotion. In many studies, people who suppressed felt just as sad, anxious, or angry as those who did not hide it, and sometimes they felt worse. The act of hiding seems to add a layer of shame or frustration on top of the original feeling, as if the emotion itself has become a secret failure. For our colleague, the tight chest now bears two stories: the weight of the upsetting message and the weight of pretending it does not matter. Over weeks and months, the pattern of chronic suppression is associated with lower overall well-being and less satisfaction in close relationships. It also correlates with reports of feeling inauthentic, as if the real self is slowly disappearing behind a curtain of acceptable answers. No one should be told that authenticity requires broadcasting every feeling in every setting. The goal is not to replace suppression with total unrestraint. The healthier movement is toward emotional choice, the ability to notice a feeling and decide what, if anything, you want to do with it in that moment. That choice depends on a skill called emotional granularity, knowing whether the knot in your stomach is disappointment, humiliation, grief, or a blend of several feelings. A person who can name the emotion with some precision already has more options than someone who can only say, "I feel bad." The third turning point arrives when we realize that fine often functions as an emotion stopper, a word that prevents us from even identifying the feeling to ourselves. Saying "I'm fine" to someone else is one act. Saying it internally, as a way of refusing to look at your own experience, is a much deeper cost. Neuroscientific work supports the idea that putting feelings into words, a process called affect labeling, can reduce the intensity of emotional responses in the brain. This does not mean a single label solves everything, but it shifts activity in regions like the amygdala toward regulation patterns, almost as if naming the tiger makes it slightly smaller. So the person who can say, "I am not fine right now, I am actually hurt and scared," has already begun lowering the pressure inside the sealed container. We can now return to the moment when the phone was turned face down, and the word "fine" closed the conversation before it could start. Notice what did not happen next: a pause, a deep breath, a choice to say something honest but simple, like "that message hit me harder than I expected." That tiny moment of openness is what suppression routinely steals from us. Not just a chance to be comforted, but a chance to think clearly about what to do next. When we hide distress from someone safe, we also hide the distress from ourselves, making it impossible to ask the most useful question. What is this feeling telling me? Emotions are not just noise. They are packets of information about what we value, what we fear, and where our boundaries are being crossed. Anger can signal that something important is being blocked. Sadness can signal a loss that needs acknowledgement. And anxiety can signal an uncertain threat that requires planning. Pushing the signal away without reading it is like turning off a smoke alarm because the sound is annoying, without checking whether there is actually any smoke. The cost is not only psychological. Over time, chronic suppression is linked with a higher risk of physical health issues, including greater reports of pain and cardiovascular strain. This does not mean holding back tears once causes a heart attack, but the persistent pattern adds load to systems that were designed to mobilize and then rest. At the relationship level, the cost accumulates silently. A friend who always receives fine stops asking, not because they do not care, but because they learn the door is closed. Our colleague is now driving home, the radio off, unaware that their jaw is clenched and their shoulders are pulled upward as if bracing for another blow. The partner waiting at home will ask the same question, "Are you okay?" And the exhausted word "fine" may come out sharper this time, almost as a dismissal. What follows is often a conflict that seems to be about chores or tone of voice, but is actually about the invisible wall that has been standing between them all day. The climax is not a single dramatic explosion. It is the quiet recognition that the wall built to protect the relationship has become its heaviest burden. We arrive at the central reversal. The energy spent trying to appear fine is often greater than the energy it would take to admit that you are not. Admitting distress does not guarantee relief, but research consistently suggests that opening up to a trusted person can reduce the body's stress response. The very act of sharing shifts the nervous system toward a calmer state, in part because trusted presence signals safety to ancient threat detection circuits. This is the moment when the opening scene changes its meaning. "I'm fine. Just tired" was not a harmless white lie, but a refusal of an offered hand. That hand was extended by someone who might have listened, who might have lightened the load, simply by sitting with the discomfort for a few minutes. The reversal is not that fine is always wrong. It is that fine is costly when it becomes automatic, unexamined, and directed at the people who could actually help. In the language of psychological science, moving from suppression toward expression and reappraisal is a shift from avoidance coping toward approach coping. Approach coping does not mean dumping every emotion raw. It means moving toward the difficulty with curiosity and a willingness to feel without being flooded. One of the most robust findings in the study of well-being is that social support buffers stress, but you can only receive support for a struggle others know you are having. So the deepest cost of pretending to be fine is not the exhaustion or the memory gaps. It is the gradual erosion of the very connections that make difficulty bearable. After the climax, the insight settles like a change in the light. What felt like strength had actually been a form of hiding, and what felt like weakness might be the truer courage. Our colleague arrives home, and this time, when the question comes, they pause for one breath before answering. They do not spill everything, but they say enough. "That message shook me today, and I do not really want to talk about it yet, but I do not want to say I am fine either." The partner's face shifts almost imperceptibly, from guarded expectation to something softer, more available. That single sentence does not magically fix the situation, but it changes the evening from one of silent parallel exhaustion into a shared space with at least a crack of light. Practical change often begins with the smallest possible deviation from the old pattern. Fine becomes actually, I'm struggling, or I don't know how to answer that right now. These phrases do not require total vulnerability. They simply stop the automatic lie and leave room for whatever truth is manageable in that moment. The skill can be practiced in lower stakes settings first, perhaps by admitting to a mild annoyance or a small disappointment instead of reflexively saying it's nothing. Over time, the brain learns that expressing a negative emotion does not always lead to rejection or disaster, a process called corrective emotional learning. A child who is taught to suppress may need years to unlearn that pattern, and that unlearning deserves patience, not self-criticism. The original message on the phone has not lost its sting simply because it was named, but the grip of fine has loosened enough for the person to notice that they are still breathing. Return now to the tight chest and the forced smile from the very first scene, and see that they were never signs of weakness or dishonesty. They were signs of a mind working very hard to protect itself with the only tool it had learned. A tool that was now ready to be set down in the presence of a safe hand.